When I accepted the babysitting job for that family, I had no idea what I was getting into. They were wealthy, living in a huge, modern house with large windows and expensive furniture. They seemed nice enough, but there was something strange about them. The mom always seemed distant, her eyes a bit glazed, as if she were living in another world. The dad was serious, spoke little, and always avoided eye contact. On the first night, after showing me around the house, they explained my duties. The baby, a boy just a few months old, slept in a room at the end of the hall. My only job was to monitor the baby cam, which displayed live footage from his room, and watch for anything unusual. I found it a bit odd. They had cameras all over the house, monitoring every corner. But, given the generous pay, I agreed. I sat on the couch, the camera set up right in front of me. At first, everything seemed fine. The baby was asleep, breathing softly, wrapped in his blanket. The hours passed slowly, and I began to feel a bit drowsy. That's when I saw it for the first time. A shadow. No, it wasn't a shadow. It looked more like a figure moving quickly across the camera. I thought I was just sleepy and rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, there was nothing there. I kept watching, but the room seemed calm. Maybe I had imagined it. But then it happened again. This time, the shadow was closer to the crib, moving slowly. My heart began to race. I got up and ran to the baby's room. I opened the door carefully, trying not to make a sound, but the room was empty. The baby was sleeping peacefully, as if nothing had happened. I went back to the living room, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. But the camera didn't lie. As soon as I sat down, there it was again, the shadow, now closer. It was like it was approaching the crib. I got up again and went to the room, but everything was normal. The baby was still asleep. The night went on like this, me going back and forth, getting more and more anxious. The next morning, I was exhausted. The parents arrived, and I decided to tell them what I had seen. The mother glanced quickly at the father, a nervous look. He just shook his head and said, "Don't worry. It has happened before. Just keep doing your job." My stomach turned, but I needed the money. I kept returning to that house night after night. Each time, the shadow seemed bolder. I saw it moving, getting closer to the crib, and every time I entered the room, it disappeared. I started to notice other things too. The temperature in the room would drop drastically, the baby monitor would glitch, buzzing with static, and I heard whispers coming from nowhere. On the third night, I finally gathered the courage to confront the parents. I asked what was going on in that house, what was that thing I was seeing on the monitor. They exchanged another look, and the mother, tears in her eyes, confessed. The previous babysitter. She disappeared. She said she saw things on the monitor too. "We don't know what it is, but we need someone to watch the baby. We need you to stay." A chill ran down my spine. I left that night without looking back. I never returned. And I still dream of that shadow, getting closer, becoming clearer.
I took the job because I needed the money. The mother, a woman in her 30s, sounded desperate on the phone. She said she needed someone immediately, that very night. She sounded almost hysterical, begging me to come. I finally agreed. When I arrived at the house, I saw it was big, old, full of doors and wooden windows, with endless hallways. She greeted me at the door, her eyes sunken and dark, like she hadn't slept in days. The kids, 2 girls, seemed normal at first glance. The older one, about 9, was quiet, barely spoke to me, just looked down and nodded. The younger one, maybe 5 or 6, seemed a bit more animated but didn't talk much either. The mother explained that the father was away on business and she herself had to leave for a few hours to take care of something urgent. She was in such a hurry that she barely gave me any instructions. She just said to keep the girls away from the basement room. As soon as she left, I was alone with the 2 girls. We were in the living room, and the younger one seemed nervous, biting her lips, looking toward the hallway that led to the basement. The older one whispered something to her, and they both ran upstairs, leaving me alone in the room. That made me uncomfortable, but I decided not to worry. Kids are like that, I thought. To pass the time, I started exploring the house a little, looking at the old pictures on the walls, some family photos, and I noticed there was a locked room, the basement. I looked around, and that's when I saw the diary. It was half hidden behind some books on the shelf. I picked it up out of curiosity, and as soon as I opened it, I saw the older girl's name written on the first page. I began flipping through it. At first, it was normal kid stuff, drawings of flowers, animals, stories about school. But the more I read, the more the drawings became strange. She talked about an invisible friend who would visit her at night. On each page, the drawings got darker. Thick, heavy lines, shapes that made no sense. One drawing caught my attention. It was the older girl holding hands with a tall, faceless figure. The title, written in large, trembling letters, read, "She's always watching me." A chill ran down my spine. I kept reading, and then I found a page with a warning scribbled in large, rushed letters, "Do not look at the mirror at the end of the hallway." I automatically glanced at the hallway to my left and saw a large mirror hanging on the wall. Suddenly, I heard footsteps running upstairs. I called for the girls, but no one answered. I decided to go up to check on them. When I got to the top of the stairs, the mirror at the end of the hallway caught my eye again. I took a few steps toward it, and that's when I noticed the reflection. It wasn't just mine. There was something there, in the background, a shadow that seemed to move behind me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I looked back at the mirror, and what I saw froze my blood. A tall, dark figure, faceless, stood right behind me, extending a long, thin hand. I screamed and turned again, but the hallway was empty. The girls appeared, finally, at the top of the stairs, their eyes wide. The older one whispered, "She told you not to look." I grabbed the 2 of them, ran downstairs, and waited in the living room until the mother returned. When she arrived, I told her everything that had happened. She looked at me, pale and tired, and said, "The previous babysitter told me the same thing, and never came back. I never returned either. But that mirror, the faceless figure, still appears in my dreams, calling me, waiting for me."
I should have been suspicious from the start. The ad seemed too good to be true, looking for a night babysitter. Excellent pay. Just 2 nights a week. When I called, a male voice answered, sounding anxious. He said he urgently needed someone to take care of 2 small children while he and his wife were out. They lived in an old Victorian house in a remote part of town. I arrived on a rainy night and felt a chill looking at the dark, imposing facade. The paint was peeling, the tall windows were covered with heavy curtains. The man, the children's father, opened the door. He had a tired look and gave me a forced smile. His wife stood behind him, looking restless, as if she were in a hurry. They gave me quick instructions. The kids were in their room, and the only rule was not to let them out after 10 p.m. Apparently, the children were afraid of something in the house. I laughed to myself, thinking it was just childish imagination. The children, 2 girls, were sweet, but there was something strange about them. The older one, about 8, barely spoke and always looked at the window. The younger one, 5, played with a rag doll without smiling. They told me they needed to be in bed before 10, no exceptions. I found it a bit bizarre but agreed. At 9:30, I put them to bed and sat in the living room, trying to distract myself with a book I had brought. But I couldn't concentrate. Something about that house made me uneasy. The silence was heavy, interrupted only by the sound of rain hitting the windows and the wind whistling. That's when I heard it for the first time. A faint tapping on the living room window. I looked quickly, but there was nothing. The rain streamed down the glass, distorting any view. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but then I heard it again, louder this time, like someone was knocking with their knuckles. I went to the window, looked outside, but all I saw was darkness. I went back to the couch, trying to convince myself it was just my mind playing tricks. But then, I heard footsteps upstairs, in the children's room. I went up the stairs, and when I reached the hallway, I saw something that made me freeze. The girls were standing at their bedroom door, their faces pale and scared. "He's outside," whispered the younger one, pointing at the hallway window. I looked in the direction she was pointing and saw him. A tall man, standing outside, right in front of the window. He was still, staring directly at me. His eyes were empty, expressionless, like they were dead. My heart pounded, and I felt cold sweat on the back of my neck. I ran downstairs to the front door, locking it and checking all the windows, trying to calm myself. When I went back to the hallway, the figure was gone. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. I asked the girls who that man was, but they just hugged each other, trembling, and whispered, "He's the man at the window, he's always here." That gave me chills, but I needed to stay calm. I called the parents, but no one answered. The minutes felt like hours, and every time I looked out the window, I felt like something was moving in the darkness outside. The tapping started again, now on the kitchen windows, the children's room windows, and every time I checked, I saw no one. Finally, I decided to stay with the girls in their room until the parents returned. I locked the door and sat on the floor, trying to calm them and myself. Then I heard the voice, a deep, raspy whisper coming from the window. "I see you." My heart raced. I grabbed the phone and called the police immediately. I tried to explain the situation as best as I could, my voice trembling. 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars arrived. The officers searched the whole house and yard but found nothing, no signs of anyone outside. They told me it could have been a shadow or the rain's reflection on the window. The parents arrived shortly after, finding the house surrounded by police. I told them what I had seen, my voice filled with fear. They exchanged quick, uncertain glances. The mother turned to me with a forced smile and said, "You know how children are. They have such vivid imaginations. I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." The father agreed, trying to sound unconcerned. "Yes, we've never seen anyone here. It's a quiet neighborhood. Maybe you got scared by the rain and the dark. Those things can play tricks." I knew what I saw was real, that the fear in the girls' eyes was genuine. But maybe they were right, maybe it was my imagination. Even so, I decided never to return to that house. Something about that night, that figure at the window, made me feel a terror I had never felt before. And just thinking about going back made my stomach turn. I quit the job that night. I still dream about that figure, those empty eyes. And I still feel that, somehow, he's always there, watching.
I took the babysitting job without thinking twice. The couple seemed desperate in the ad, offering above-average pay for someone who could start immediately. They wanted someone to look after a newborn baby at night so they could get some rest. It was a large, elegant house, isolated at the end of a cul-de-sac. When I arrived, the mother, a pale and thin woman, greeted me with a nervous smile, while her husband sat on the couch, looking exhausted and weary. She led me to the baby's room, a small, nicely decorated space in soft shades of blue and white. In the crib, I saw what was supposed to be the baby, a small, delicate bundle of blankets. She explained that the baby was a light sleeper and rarely cried. I found it odd but didn't question it. At that moment, I just wanted to make a good impression. On the first night, the silence was almost oppressive. I sat in the living room where they had left the baby monitor on. The screen showed the room in hazy green tones, the typical image of a night vision camera. The baby seemed quiet, motionless under the blankets. The whole house was immersed in such deep silence that I could almost hear my own heartbeat. Hours passed slowly, and with each minute, I grew more uneasy. It was strange, the baby didn't move, didn't make a sound. Then suddenly, I heard a soft cry, distant, almost as if coming from another room. I looked at the baby monitor, but the image hadn't changed. The baby was there, still, as if nothing was happening. The crying continued, low but clear enough to send a shiver down my spine. I stood up slowly and went to the baby's room. I pushed the door open and peeked inside. The room was dark, but the light from the monitor cast a faint glow. I moved closer to the crib, but what I saw made my blood run cold. The crib was empty. I stepped back, my heart racing wildly. I ran back to the living room and looked at the monitor again. The image still showed the baby, sleeping quietly, but I knew the crib was empty. The crying grew louder, echoing through the hallways, seeming to come from everywhere at once. I tried calling the parents, but they didn't answer. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what was happening. I looked at the monitor again, and this time, the baby was gone. Just the empty crib, and a shadow moving in the background. I felt a chill run down my spine. Not knowing what to do, I decided to search the house, trying to follow the sound of the crying. It seemed to come from upstairs, so I slowly climbed the stairs. The house was cold, much colder than before. When I reached the end of the hallway, the crying stopped. Complete silence. I stood still for a moment, my heart in my throat. Then, a low laugh, almost a whisper, echoed from the back room. My instinct told me to run, to get out of there as fast as possible, but something pulled me toward the door. I had to know. I opened the door slowly, and what I saw left me frozen. The room was empty, except for an old crib, different from the one in the baby's room. It looked ancient, made of dark wood, covered in a layer of dust. Inside the crib was a porcelain doll with sad eyes, its face cracked. Beside it, a yellowed note, carelessly folded. With trembling hands, I picked it up and opened it. "Thank you for taking care of him," the message read. The ink looked old, as if it had been written many years ago. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The crying started again, this time, right next to me. I dropped the note and ran out of the room. I ran to the exit, panic overtaking me. When I reached the living room, the parents were there, looking at me as if nothing had happened. I told them what I had seen, my voice trembling with fear. They exchanged glances, visibly uncomfortable, and the father gave a strange smile. I couldn't understand what was happening, and something inside me told me there was more to this story. I decided I needed to know the truth. The next day, I did some brief research on my own. I searched for news about the house, the couple, anything that could give me a clue. That's when I found out what would change everything. I discovered that the baby I was supposed to be caring for had died months ago. The child had tragically passed away in a household accident, but the couple never accepted the loss. Since then, they had continued hiring babysitters to care for the baby, as if he were still alive. The news included a picture of them with the baby, and the shock hit me like a punch in the stomach. It was the same baby I had seen on the monitor. When I returned to the house to collect my things, the parents were there, acting like nothing had happened. They asked if I would come back the next night. I just shook my head and left. I never looked back. But even now, sometimes, I still hear the cry of a baby, faint and distant, as if trying to reach me, as if he were still there, waiting for someone to take care of him.